All right, welcome in to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Drew Landry. And in today's episode, folks, I get into a lot. I finally just going to put this whole thing to rest with this whole mediocre gate bunch of malarkey. And I spend a lot of time talking about that today. Spend a little bit more extra time getting into the school voucher program in Texas that is currently open. And then I end with some recent polling from the president, from the primary Senate races, and even get into the polling that's been released, not so many internal, but polling that's been released from for the Texas governor's race. So with that in mind, let's start off with the ongoing frustration that is and continues to be this quote unquote mediocre gate. Okay, that's a media spun term. It's cute. I'm not gonna lie. It's kind of fun, but it's also really frustrating because this is exactly the kind of crap that Democrats do. Okay, just when you think that they have a really good opportunity to really make headway on something, they just go ahead and just say, "Hey, let me have this and let me just, shoot myself in the foot." What fun. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So with that said, let's go back. Let's just understand what all happened here, how this whole thing took place. If you remember from the last episode, I spent a little bit of time talking about this, and I just spent some time on it. But let's revisit this so that we can get a bigger picture. What happened here is that there was an influencer from Dallas, and I'm not going to mention anybody's name here because look, I'm compared to these others, I know I'm just starting out. I'm trying to get this thing off the ground, so I'm not exactly a big name person. I'm well aware of that. But I want to be clear, I'm also not going to name names because that gives them the type of joy that they like. They like the fact that I name their names. So, and I'm not going to do that. It's like that scene from Seinfeld, name names. No, I'm not doing that. But there was an influencer apparently from the Dallas area who was in support of State Representative James Tallarico for this Senate race. Went over and had a private conversation with James Tallarico. Tallarico apparently tells the woman that he was ready to take on Colin Allred. But the former congressman and former Democratic nominee for Senate in 2024, he called him a mediocre black man. That's what the lady said. That's what Tallarico said. So she says that's a verbatim thing. That's what he said. And then she makes a post of this, and then it gets to Colin Allred, who got his feelings hurt, and then he makes a post about it. And now the media is involved in this. Okay, and look, I don't want to spend too much time about what I said last time, but I want to reiterate a few things. A private conversation is a private conversation. And if you have any ethics about you, you leave private conversations in private circles, first and foremost. I don't care what sex you are, what gender you are, what color you are. Private conversations are private conversations. That needs to be just flat out, period, the end. Second part about this is, did he actually call Colin Allred a mediocre black man? Now, the release that was brought out here, the press release that Tallarico said that brought out was that, hey, look, I wasn't calling him mediocre. I was calling his campaign mediocre. That's essentially what he said. And he's not wrong. I'm sorry, Colin. I'm sorry, Congressman. Your 2024 campaign was mediocre at best. At best. So he got upset about that. He got all just upset and just, how dare he call me mediocre? Ooh, how little children get upset whenever they don't get their way. That's what happened here with the congressman. Now, let's also know that he's in a primary in and of himself for his seat. He wants to reclaim his seat, and he's going up against the woman who took his place in 2024, former state representative and current Congresswoman Julie Johnson. So you got these two who are in a pretty contested primary. And now Allred is trying to get more name recognition, get more money. I mean, this is all just a big ploy here. That's all that this is. So his name gets out there. So now I don't know if I'd want my name next to mediocre, but, whatever. Now, I said this last time, too. I was part of a movie club called the Mediocre Movie Club. I know all about being mediocre. Anyway, that aside, this whole thing could have been done. This whole thing should have been done last week. But here comes the media. Here comes the media. Oh, Democrats. Oh, boy. Oh, Democrats. Let's go see what they're doing. Did the media in Texas and the national areas just forget that the Democrats are the party out of power? Did they hit their head on something and just go, well, this is 1993 again? What? So here we are, the media getting involved. Excuse me. CBS Texas and their correspondent had a sit-down interview, a real tough sit-down interview with Colin Allred. And the former congressman says, Tallarico called me and I gave him the opportunity to apologize, but he didn't do it. He didn't apologize to me, calling my campaign mediocre. And I'm reading this and I'm going, and? What's the point here? Where is the there? Where is there? Where is the... There is no there. What am I supposed to get from this? That Allred is still upset? I don't care. Who cares if Allred is upset? Maybe his family, maybe his campaign, but the media is falling into this tremendously large trap that's easily avoidable. But you fell into it anyway. Let's not look at the fact that Kim Paxton, the philanderer, the adulterer, the impeached Kim Paxton, was recently endorsed by the Christian group called the Turning Point USA, which, their standards must be pretty low. Let's just face the fact here. I mean, if you're endorsing Ken Paxton, who's not only cheated on his wife twice with two different women and is divorced and is a crook and is corrupt, somehow you get endorsed by the Christian PAC? What? What is going on? Media don't want to spend time on that. Media don't want to talk more about the Republican races to what's going on with Wesley Hunt. Don't want to give John Cornyn any more conversation. Don't want to seek into whether or not the president is going to endorse in that primary. No, let's spend on time about the party out of power and how they're still circling the wagons because they can't find a direction to go anywhere else other than circling the wagons. Somehow that is a much more interesting story. I don't know. It's really stupid is what it is. It's really stupid. But wait, it's going to get more dumb. Because the San Antonio News Express the reporter here, John Moritz, who's one of the best political writers, one of the best political reporters in the state. All right, he's in the top 5 of all the best. Make no mistake about that. But I don't know why he felt that this story needed to be revived too. This is a zombie. This whole mediocre gate is nothing more than an idiotic, juvenile instance where teenagers are getting mad and teenagers are making the news. The angry teen is now making the news. That's what this is about. But let me just say here as to what the whole thing, as what kind of new wrinkle was brought out here. There's a whole new conversation that stems from someone who I follow on social media. She follows me on Threads. I think her analysis is also really good. I don't have a single problem with her analysis on a lot of things. And she has a podcast called Howdy Politics, and she's a good podcaster. I mean, she has thoughtful things to say on the progressive side. So I'm saying all this because what I'm going to say, I don't want you to think I'm critical of her or her podcast or her personally, because I'm not. But I do have a thing about what she said. Now, that's really my issue. The thing here is that she had the creator of this, and I'm not naming names here. The creator of Howdy Politics had an Instagram page to where she quote-unquote spilled the tea on Tallarico. About apparently State Representative Tallarico, again, this is quoting from the news story from Moritz at the expressnews.com. The creator of Howdy Politics accused Tallarico of sabotaging an informal agreement that he would run for governor as part of a slate of statewide Democratic candidates led by Beto O'Rourke, who would run for Senate. Joaquin Castro would run for Attorney General. And then you'd have Tallarico running for governor. This person's argument was that with a unified ticket, at least two of them would have won. I don't know what that looked like. I don't know what that would mean. This person needs to go back and look at the 2002 Democratic ticket. That was what was called they called themselves the Dream Team. You know, Tony Sanchez was on board with that. You know, you had a whole bunch of other people who were slated in that to go up against John Cornyn. I mean, and Rick Perry and all the other Republicans win that. And Rick Perry had this very cute phrase, they're going to wake up to a rude awakening. They're going to have a rude awakening from this dream. And so, unified tickets are nice. I mean, they sound great, but, we just haven't had much of a success with this, as we have seen in Texas. When this was brought to Tallarico's attention, he acknowledged that he considered running for governor. Yeah, okay, I thought about it. And considering, you really think about what all that entails, and, can you fundraise, and, are you willing to, is that helpful? Do you have, will you be able to convince people that you're the better executive? Whereas, where he considered it, but rejected any suggestion that he promised. He just said that the Senate race was a better fit for him. Okay. But now you get another influencer involved in this. Again, someone else who I follow on social media, someone else who I highly respect, someone else who I read. And I this is getting pretty preposterous here. But this person, again, I'm not going to name names here, but this person puts on Facebook, own private Facebook page, their own private one now, and aired out a bunch of grievances as to what's taking place. And that's just, went on and said that this person had an issue with the other influencer trying to make money, and that there was this attempt that the reason that the creator of Howdy Politics was spilling the tea on Tallarico was that she offered him to do a job and he rejected it, so now she's mad. This is dumb. This is flat out stupid. But the Howdy Politics person admitted that she submitted a proposal to the Tallarico campaign about a job to provide the campaign with strategical advice, not to write flattery articles. But she said that she actually withdrew her offer because of some concerns she had with the campaign. Doesn't really say what those concerns are, but had a bit of an issue with it. And that's where we are now. That's where we are. And that's what we're talking about. The influencers on the left, the Democratic influencers, are causing more of a hindrance than they are of a help. These are the people who learned from the 2024 campaign that you got to get on these podcasts because apparently the bro vote, like the Joe Rogan goofballs out there, are listening to these these podcasts, and you got to engage with them and all yada 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 yada. Okay. And so this is what is being tried to be done here, is that they're wanting to have, hey, you got to engage with these podcast people. You got to get them out, talk to them on YouTube. You really got to do all this stuff, all this. And I think these influencers, two of whom I both respect, and I both follow. I have to repeat that. Has to be said. Are taking advantage of it, and I don't blame them. The problem is that here we are, is that when you don't get your way, this is what you're doing. And now they're behaving like little children. And the Tallarico campaign it's really backfiring on, this whole thing is kind of coming back on them and the people who support them, who supports his campaign. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, who, has no problem with charisma. Let's just be honest here. Neither does Tallarico. No problem with charisma at all. Ken Paxton, I guess in private situations, he has no problem with charisma either. But Colin Allred, I mean, look, a doornail has more charisma than him. The wall that you see behind me that I blurred out has more personality than him. Let's just be honest. So that's the issue here. Is that these candidates, these Democratic candidates have relied or are trying to start this new reliance on influencers, and the influencers aren't getting what they want, so now they're having their own little videos and saying, well, they are secretly doing this. It's the freaking Three Stooges, people. It's like Larry and Curly can't get it together, and we need Moe to come in and bop their heads together. I guess some of these influencers really just like being out of power. I guess they just like that. I guess. I mean, if you've lived in Texas long enough, you realize that's all you know. I mean, if you started to live in Texas beyond 2003, all that you've known is the Democrats are out of power. So, yeah, I get it. You only know how to lose. So let's just keep doing the same thing over and over again, and let's expect a different result. This is stupid. So dumb. But this all comes back to the fact that somebody had a private conversation, an influencer had a private conversation, who didn't keep it quiet, who didn't keep it private. And I said this last time, and it bears repeating. I've been in the room with private conversations. I've had them. I have a lot of private conversations. I'm sure you listeners do too. How many times do you tell other people about your private conversations? Probably not a lot. So this just blows my mind that this influencer would have a private conversation, uncomfortable with what's being heard, doesn't ask for clarity. At least we're not told that. Apparently we're told everything as to what happened here, but we're not told whether or not there was some sort of call for clarity. Hey, what did you mean by that? Apparently that didn't happen. And in all the private conversations that I've had that make me go, I don't know what that means, I ask that particular question. I don't know what that means. Can you clarify, please? I would love to know what you mean by that. I guess that this person was so nervous, so out of mind that they just couldn't grasp themselves to ask that particular question. I'm trying to wrap my head around this. And there are times I get it. Whenever you are in certain situations that you just kind of disassociate. And maybe that's what happened. But that person also has to own up to the fact. You got to put that out there. You know, I should have asked for clarity as to what he meant by this statement. Should have asked for clarity. Wasn't done. It also speaks to the character of Colin Allred. Truth was told to you, dude. The truth got to you. And you just couldn't just let it simmer. You couldn't have had a private phone call. You know how many times the right has public disputes? I mean, it happens ever so often. It happens ever so often. And when it does, the media is quick to report on it because they're the party in power. It's juicy when the governor and the lieutenant governor aren't on the same page. It's actually interesting to know that when Lieutenant Governor Patrick, 4 or 5 years ago, said we need to have a special session, and Governor Abbott said that's a pretty goofy idea. And when that was thrown in his face, well, I didn't hear him say that. You know, Benghazi was pretty interesting. Still is. But Mediocre Gate? This is the dumbest of dumb that has been done by people who want access and don't have it. This is, you just have to wonder, do you even want to win? And, I don't know the influencer who started this whole thing. I'm still trying to figure out some of these social media programs like TikTok. I don't, what the hell do I know? But this whole thing about bringing it to media attention and getting actual traction with it is on them. This is a real issue now because the media just couldn't say, that's nothing, which they should have done. They do that to other big issues, by the way. They will continue to do that with other big issues that happen across this state and across this country. So what? But when the Democrats have a problem, God, we're just right back to 5th grade. I made a post about this on social media. And I called it high school because it's federal, and so federal stuff is a bit more high school than the ledge. The ledge is very much middle school. Now there are some people who might listen to this and might get a little upset that I said that. Well, check your ego, man. Come on, dude, get it together. There are people in the legislature who take things so personally. They just can't be like Elsa and let it go. They need to. There are a few grown-ups in the room, but there's a lot of people who just go, "Oh, why are you being so mean to me?" They're also vicious. Again, there are people in Congress who are completely vicious. I don't want to deny any of that because it's true. There are those. But here we are. We're talking about this thing with Colin Allred, who's not in Congress, and how his feelings were hurt. And he's having a woe is me moment. And he's telling everyone, well, Tallarico had the chance to apologize, and he should have really apologized. Oh my gosh, who cares? The media in this state really needs to slap themselves across the face and go, this is a stupid story. This is dumb. And there are people in media who I really like and I really respect. I think this story is below the pay grade of John Moritz. Absolutely. This is dirt rag. This is dirt sheet malarkey. All right. This is stuff that people who have Substacks should be writing about. But has it hurt anybody in the polls? Well, the last big poll that was taken was out of University of Houston, the Hobby School of Public Affairs, and it had Crockett up by 8. There's another poll that was taken that had Crockett up by 1. Then there was another poll that was taken a little earlier that had Tallarico up by 9. I've said this once, and I'm going to say it again. The polling for this race, for the Democratic side, is incredibly volatile. This is so roller coastery. We don't know. I don't think anybody knows. And that's okay. That's not an issue. Shouldn't be. I mean, this is a competitive primary. And primaries is where you where you bring up, your party base ideas. Who's going to be the best candidate to take on so-and-so, who's got the best values, yada, 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 yada. That's the best place to really bring that out. But the problem here is that we're not getting any clear consensus as to what's happening. Same thing goes on the Republican side. I mean, you don't hear anything out of Ken Paxton because Paxton thinks he thinks there's going to be a runoff. Wesley Hunt is, he had one good day in the polls, in that UH poll. Same place that polled Crockett by 8 had Wesley Hunt with 26. Okay? Well, I'm sorry, with 26 percentage points. Had Paxton up by a few. So, and I became prisoner of the moment. I was like, oh, well, Wesley Hunt's going to be surging here, of course, right? Then I saw another poll that had him right back to where he's always been, 16%, 16, 15, 17%. Until there's consistency that he's in the 20s, this ain't. I had to remind myself of that. Don't be that person who's prisoner of the moment. Don't be that guy. And so I won't. I think you know this. I've said this before many times. The Democrats want Ken Paxton to be the nominee. The Republicans want Jasmine Crockett to be the nominee. And I just want to say this to both sides. Be careful what you wish for. Be careful what you wish for. Now, outside of that, one last thing I want to say about this whole thing, and I don't want to talk about this really ever again. Yes, it's dumb. This is so dumb. But this is where you see the resolve of campaigns. Tallarico is not hidden. He's not gone, oh, no, leave me alone, like Paxton does. You bring up an actual fact about Paxton, he's, getting fake Uber accounts and, or if you're Ted Cruz, if there's any major problem, you go on vacation. But Tallarico has basically said, look, that meeting happened. I didn't say that, but I said this, or I meant this. I considered doing that. I didn't do it. He's been very transparent in all of this, for better, for worse. If I was him, I just wouldn't even address it. I just be like, we're moving on with this. So he had two choices. He decided to address it head on and try to put it all behind him and move forward. But the people who keep bringing this up are the freaking influencers. And the average everyday person doesn't get this. The average everyday primary voter, whether you're on the Republican side or the Democratic side, had no idea about any of this stuff. Because they have better things to do with their lives. Whether it's, trying to put food on the table or pay their electric bill. Wondering if their kid's school is going to be there in the fall. Am I going to be able to pay the mortgage or pay the rent this month? That's, the prices of groceries and the tariffs and that's what they care about. That's the big thing here. But now it's made actual media that people watch and people read. People sort of read. And now it's a big deal. And here we are. What is typically like, comic book, the funnies section level stuff here has now gone to straight front page. And this is all the doing of these influencers and the Texas media. And it does not ever detract from the fact this is 100% stupid. Okay. I'm done talking about it. With that Senate race, it's also interesting for the fact that Kim Paxton is one of the. I've written a lot about him, but I've never written more than school vouchers and public education. And right now, those who want to get in the application process for school vouchers can do that in the state of Texas. Look, you're going to hear people say school choice. I went through that last time. And I got into a debate with someone on social media who, I don't know, is a lookalike of Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, if lizard people is what I should say. If lizard people really existed, he would be one of them. But that aside, it's the same old stuff you hear all the time. Same old stuff that I mentioned last time. Choice. You got, But the thing that blew me away was that how upset this person got and how upset some other people get when they said, well, those who make 500% above the federal poverty line will not get any sort of assistance. What? You want to tell me that somebody who's making $165,000 a year, a family of four making $165,000 a year, poor them that they can't get a voucher? What? I'm still wrapping my head around this. This is why this guy is so fringe. I mean, he wrote an op-ed with another an opinion piece in the Dallas Morning News at the beginning of the 25 session saying how we need to do the voucher program. with another fringe person in the house. I mean, the crazies know how to hang around each other. They must have, crazy spray. They attract. They're not opposites. They're all attracted to the same weirdo, crazy pheromone. Whatever. But the voucher plan that's currently out there, it's gotten, I think the last number I saw, and it's probably gone up, has been about 70,000 applicants. At least that's what the Wall Street Journal, the Wall Street Journal reported it's over 60,000. So maybe it's closer to 70, maybe it's higher than 70. You get the idea. It's a lot. And they got about a month or so until until that ends, until that application process ends. I would just like to point out one thing. You don't have to apply to attend a public school. You don't have to fill out an application process for that. You don't have to wait to be accepted into a public school. Unless you're transferring, that's a whole other conversation. But still, if that school's going to allow transfers from out of district, you're going to another public school. And if you live in that zip code, they're going to accept you. There's no turning them down. Whereas a private school could say, you know what? Thanks, but no thanks. You're going to require something more? Sorry. Can't do it. It's just mind-blowing. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I'm ready to give this 5 years. I'm ready to give this up until the 2031 legislative session. And I want to see the numbers. Because, as you know, I've said this before, and it bears repeating. The only time we see any sort of major achievement, I say major, any sort of achievement at all within these voucher programs is when they are very tight, when it's highly exclusive to certain people, when there's a very tight lid on income, when there's a tight lid as to what kind of people they're trying to really serve. And even those gains are modest at best. When they expand it like they did in Indiana, like they do in Florida, like they do in Arizona, you don't have to take take my word for it. You can just search it. You ask your AI this, and just to reiterate here, you can ask ChatGPT. Is the student achievement in schools, in the private schools of Arizona, Indiana, Florida, higher than that of their public schools? Is the student achievement in school voucher programs that have universal school voucher programs, are they higher than their public schools? The answer is going to be no. But somehow this is the sell. Choice. Voucher plans are, that's getting so many people to really sign up for it. Good for them. That's good salesmanship. The governor's getting his $1 million, that's a well worth $1 million investment plan from Jeff Yass. But I've said this before. What is it, like the fifth time I've said that? But it bears repeating here. Public education should not be a partisan issue. It shouldn't. The rural areas like their public schools. I don't need a poll to tell me that. I don't need evidence to tell me that. There is, but I don't need it. But what we constantly see, though, are this constant berating of and browbeating of how bad teachers are, and how the schools are failing, and blah 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 blah. You need a choice. You need a choice. Oh. You know my responses to all that. I mentioned all those things last time. But the plan is out there, and when we get the numbers, when we actually see the results coming in, and we measure them, and they have to be the same things. We have to measure them the exact same way. You have to say, student achievement in this compared to student achievement in that. It has to be the same. You have to be measuring the exact same thing. And we all know what's going to happen. The evidence is not going to lie. The evidence is going to be that the public schools are better than the private schools, and they will eat crow. But then they'll make excuses. Well, those are bad teachers. Those are bad public schools. Blah, 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 blah. We need more. No. No thanks. All right. One last thing I want to mention here. This is going to be a fairly short episode, not nearly as long as the last one. It was I wanted to mention about some new polling here, and I always like to start with the presidential polling because that's always a good place to really start. Is that the president continues to be wildly unpopular. Well, I'm looking at Real Clear Politics here. You can see that down below. Is that at the time when I'm recording this, the polling that's here has him at about 42%. That's bad. That ain't good by any stretch. Even the polls that are supposed to be, for him, like Rasmussen polls, Big Data poll, Harvard Harris, Morning Consult. Those are all like more on the more conservative heavy, more Republican heavy than anything else, and he's not doing good there either. This is one of the most underwater presidencies we've seen in a long time. Okay, let's look at some of the issues here for the president. On the economy, he's barely at 40%. He's hovering around 40%. There's a net disapproval of the president's handling of the economy of nearly 15. A net disapproval of 15. Close to 15. That's nuts. If we look at inflation, this one hasn't been polled in a little while, but still, that one's pretty pathetic too. Net disapprove of 24%. Net is a spread between his approval and disapproval is 24%. It's awful. Negative. The economy and inflation is what reelected this guy. And on those two issues in and of itself, no good. Immigration, probably his strongest issue. His spread is at negative 8.4. He's underwater on that. 44%, this is the Real Clear Politics average here. About 44% of the polls say that he's at an average there, and the disapproval is 52.4. I mean, that's his strongest issue. You look at foreign policy. Nothing good here either. 40.2% is the average of approval. 53.4% is the average of disapproval. That's a spread of 13.2 in the tank. Another strong issue that he has is crime. This is another, immigration and crime are really his two strongest issues, and even that they're not that good. Where I'm looking at this now, he's looking at 47% approve, 48.8% disapprove. That's probably his best poll. And that was taken maybe 3 weeks ago. Russia and Ukraine still wildly underwater. No one is really approving of that. And even with Hamas and Israel, which hasn't been done, and respondents haven't asked this question in a while, and it's still underwater on that. What I think is really interesting, though, is if we look at another thing. I mean, look, the president's approval ratings are just dismal. I mean, why else is he wanting the states to gerrymander? I mean, his policies are bad, and he doesn't want to take that to the voters. So he's having them, just mess with your own districts, and we can win that way. Okay, I mean that's a strategy, but I want to say this. As it is with this is always the case. These numbers are fluid. The economy can easily turn around. And people can feel that, and they say, okay, I like the president now. That can happen. I mean, we're only doing this in February, folks. We've got 9 months of this. Things can change. And what's really interesting also is the favorability. You look at the favorability of the Democratic Party, let's say 2 months ago, or say and at the beginning of the year, it was a negative. It was a net negative of 26%. Its worst was about a few weeks ago, was a net negative of 32. Now that number's going up. They're a net negative of 19.9 or 20. Well, where are the Republicans? Not too far ahead, as their net approval, their net favorability is 12.8, negative 12.8. So you're starting to see some gaps being closed here. That's why that I mentioned that. And the general election, the generic congressional vote, what they would ask respondents is, in your district, do you plan on voting for the Democrat or for the Republican? The Democrat gets the advantage on this, and we're talking of an average of a little more than 5. That's less than what it was in 2018, but that's still more than the Republicans, and there's still plenty of time for that to go up and plenty of time for that to go down. Let's be honest. One other thing I wanted to mention before I get out of here on polling was, what's the polling look like for the Texas governor's race? Okay, so where that is, because this is also pretty cool to see, how the polling is being done by state and how that operates. The recent poll that is expected to be between Governor Greg Abbott and State Representative Gina Hinojosa is that it's getting closer. Now, granted, again, we're talking about all this stuff here at the beginning of the month, but you would think that Abbott, who's going for his 4th term, would have, and has a mountain full of cash, would have this gigantic lead. He doesn't. I mean, it's within single digits. Some recent polling has him only ahead by 7. There's another poll that came out that was more of an insider poll, has him only ahead by 3. So why is that a big deal? Well, Drew, it's still February, don't get too excited. I'm not. The reason it's a big deal is it's only February. The governor should be way ahead. This is breathing into the Hinojosa campaign, because the governor's races, folks, I want you to be clear about this. This is a down ballot race. This race is going to be considered to be a referendum on the president, which is why the approval rating of the president matters so much. So if his approval ratings aren't up, if they don't get above, if they're not improving here by September, if they're not at 48, 49% by September, Republicans are going to have a bad night come election night. I don't care how things are gerrymandered. If the economy stays bad, it ain't going to matter. But if things improve, Republicans will have and there's plenty of time for that to happen. But governorships, statewide races here are going to be a referendum on the president. And the thing that Hinojosa has to do is continue to convince voters that they need to fire the incumbent and hire her. And the one who has the most money to do that is not her. Governor Abbott has like over $70 million in the war chest. She can fundraise. I don't want to say that she can't. But she's got a pretty big mountain to climb here. And if she can reach enough voters who don't like Abbott, you may be looking at a very interesting race. But all that has to do, and look, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, but it needs to be said. This is all going to come back to see how much of an influence the president has on this. And a lot of it's going to come down to his approval ratings. And there's a lot of polling to suggest that it's not that good even in Texas. All right. Folks, thanks for being here. I appreciate you listening. I will see you again very soon. Have a great day. Have a good week. Have a great time, whatever it is you're doing. See you next time.